This was me in the grandstands of Worldwide Technology Raceway on June 4th, 2023. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was watching what might very well go down in history as the final hurrah of my favorite driver's career. Everything leading up to this moment told me that Kyle Busch was back on top, sticking it to the man at JGR, proving that he could make it in a lower-level ride and make a run for the championship, which made the next year and a half all the more painful.
Oh, y'all are so loving. Thank you.
The villain, the anti-hero, the heel, or as Brad Keselowski would put it,
Kyle Busch is an ass.
This man was defined by these sorts of words for the majority of his career.
I'm sure I'm complaining and I'm whining and I'm a crybaby. But
driving for a foreign manufacturer in a sport full of red-blooded American power, beefing with just about everyone he came in contact with, and even throwing shade at the sanctioning body itself.
I'm still not a very big fan of these things. I can't stand to drive them. They suck.
He earned nicknames: Wild Thing, Cryle, KFB, Rowdy. Kyle Busch was, and I would argue still is to an extent, a rebel.
If you don't like that kind of racing, don't even watch. Racing all the way to the end. Kyle, we know how cold it is.
I was first introduced to Kyle Busch when I saw this happen on a TV at a travel stop back in 2007.
Oh, and we've got trouble on the track, and it's Kyle Busch upside down.
Big time crash. Kyle Busch goes upside down and rolls down across on his roof here on lap 26. Cars comes back over and now side over side barrel rolls. And Kyle Busch is climbing out of that car. Wow.
And back in the day, guess what? I was on the hate train too. I was only 7 or 8 at the time, but Kyle's arrogance definitely pissed me off. It was a good thing my dad didn't let me stay for the entire race at Chicagoland Speedway in 2008, or I would have seen Kyle win, which I would have thrown a fit over. But over the next couple of years, I don't know what happened. Everyone else still hated him as much as ever, but I grew to like him, and eventually he became my favorite driver. And I can proudly say that ever since around 2010, I've been a part of Rowdy Nation, Kyle Busch's large and loyal fan base. I couldn't tell you why it happened, it just happened. The same deal happened with Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin a few years ago. I used to hate them, but now they're some of my favorite drivers too. I don't know, I guess I'm just attracted to the villains.
Can you talk about how you made your way back to the field?
Pure talent. That's about it. My pit crew did absolutely nothing to help me out tonight. My truck drove like
Now, full transparency and a little bit of background here. I was a die-hard NASCAR fan from around 2007 to 2009, from when I was around 7 to 9 years old. After that, I kept up with the sport intermittently until around 2013 when I tuned out completely, save for one race here or there. But in 2020, when NASCAR came back and I was cooped up in my parents' house with nothing to do, NASCAR proved to be a good break in the monotony, and I fell back in love with the sport, and more than I ever had before. Sadly, that also meant that I had missed out on both of Kyle Busch's championship runs, which is something I'm never going to live down. But I was back in the swing of things and more invested than ever. And what a season for me to come back to. The dominant driver from the era I grew up watching was retiring, my home track got booted from the schedule and still hasn't seen stock car racing come back. This dude who I had a trading card of that called him Undiscovered was now very much on the map, and wait, Phoenix is the finale now? And what's with this playoff stuff? What happened to the chase? All this to say that I came back to NASCAR having to relearn lots of things that I thought I knew, and at a time that Kyle Busch's career took a turn. But what about Kyle? Kyle Busch got his start in NASCAR at such a young age he actually wasn't allowed to compete at first. When he finally ran his first races, the fanbase didn't take too kindly to him, considering he was the younger brother of Kurt Busch, who had garnered a reputation as quite the hothead. But he worked his way up through the ranks and made it to the top echelon of stock car racing, the NASCAR Cup Series. He ran a few seasons for Hendrick Motorsports starting in 2005 before jumping ship for Joe Gibbs Racing to drive the number 18 Toyota Camry in 2008. And this was when his career took off and his reputation entered a freefall.
He's got him. I believe he's got him this time. Oh, he turned him.
No!
Oh, he turned him. No.
You know what, Darryl? What I did not like what I saw the wheels on the 18 car turn to the right.
They're still.
Boyer takes a wild ride into the safer barrier, and Kyle Busch turned Harvick around after they had made contact half a lap before.
And despite all his quarrels, he just kept on winning. Up until 2015, though, he couldn't put a championship run together due to one reason or another. So let's talk about that year, 2015. That was the year when he broke his leg at the start of the year in a minor league crash at Daytona International Speedway. And then, against all odds, as soon as he was cleared to race again, he went on a tear, scoring win after win en route to a cup title. A controversial title, to be sure, given how champions were crowned at the time. So for good measure in 2019, Kyle did it again, this time running a full season, and that shut up any doubters. He was on top of the world, and it seemed like nobody had anything for Rowdy. Enter 2020. A few things happened that year. One of the things that happened was that NASCAR decided to axe practice and qualifying for the majority of the races that year in an attempt to keep everyone as far away from each other as much as they could, which worked to an extent. However, that meant that drivers couldn't log laps before race day to fine-tune their cars to their liking to give them a competitive edge. And as it turns out, aside from probably Jimmy Johnson, this season hurt for nobody more than Kyle Busch. As the season went on, the dramatic drop in performance from the 18 was very noticeable. People often come up with explanations for drivers having down years. Team changes, crew chief swaps, sophomore slumps, what have you. And I believe what killed Kyle Busch's competitive edge in 2020 was the lack of practice sessions. You could see a clear dip in his performance on race day, and it really sucked to see as someone who was just getting fully invested in the sport again. What sucked even more was that whenever he'd put on a strong performance, something would happen and he wouldn't be able to win.
He's in the fence.
Up into the wall he goes. The 18 also in the wall. Eric Jones gets caught up in it as well.
Busch trying to get in the pit lane.
Kevin Harvick, the new leader.
Man, what a race car.
Hearing Rick Allen make this call at the end of the Roval race hit me like a truck.
I think the other big story that comes from what just happened here, the finish, the defending series champion, Kyle Busch, is eliminated. He will not have a shot at defending his title.
I was fully expecting a winless season. Luckily for me, that didn't happen. At the third to final race of the season at Texas Motor Speedway, Kyle Busch put together the perfect night and scored his lone win of 2020, which was definitely a good night for me.
Yes!
After that, I kind of breathed easy for the rest of the season and buckled in for 2021, which I was hoping would fare better for Rowdy than 2020. And that wish was granted, but not to the sort of degree that I was hoping for. Kyle Busch scored his first win of the season at Kansas Speedway. The race's sponsor, Busch Beer, did something fun and put the race's name up to a vote of community-proposed ideas. And the race ended up being called the Bushy McBusch Race 400. And wouldn't you know it, this race was also being run on Kyle Busch's birthday.
On his birthday, Kyle Busch turns 36 and gets his first win of the year.
Kind of funny how things work out. His second win of the season came at Pocono, at the second race it was holding on its doubleheader weekend. But nobody was expecting a Busch win to happen because of one small issue.
I think we're going to have a problem here the rest of the day. I don't know if we'll be able to make it. So the trans is popping out of fourth gear, it won't stay in. If I hold it back like really hard, it'll stay, but I'm not sure I can maintain that.
Putting my bias for Kyle aside, this is still one of the more impressive runs I've seen a driver go on. He had transmission issues, but Kyle persisted and got the win anyway. He played it smart and stretched his fuel just enough so that when everyone in front of him ran out of gas, he was ready to take the win for himself. This race also gave us this fun soundbite.
We talked about the issues with the transmission, but it's not bothering Kyle. In fact, so much so he is singing while he's in the lead. I'm not kidding. Listen.
I went to the summer race at Atlanta with my dad while visiting family, and I got to see Kyle Busch make a real charge for the win. But as fate would have it, Kurt Busch ended up getting the better of his younger brother, and he went on to win instead. I wasn't disappointed. I was actually pretty happy, but I definitely would have preferred to see the other Busch win. Kyle Busch then went on to make it as far as the round of 8 before getting eliminated from championship contention, which paved the way for a different Kyle to win the Cup that year. But I was still keeping my chin up because we'd won more races than last year, though not by much at all. And with Ty Gibbs, the grandson of Joe Gibbs Racing's team owner, exploding onto the stock car racing scene, it was all but guaranteed that somebody at the JGR camp was going to get the boot soon. And if Kyle didn't pick up the pace in 2022, it was probably going to be him. 2022 marks the beginning of the next-gen era, a brand new car, a race schedule that still didn't have Chicagoland Speedway back, and more. But some things still stayed the same, and one of those things was that Kyle Busch was still in the number 18 Toyota Camry at Joe Gibbs Racing, as he had been since 2008. For the first few weeks of the season, Kyle scored some respectable finishes, but it wasn't looking like he'd be much of a title threat, which bummed me out. And Kyle wasn't too happy about it either.
The same guy
And there were other storylines too that had heavy implications for Rowdy. Ty Gibbs was now in the upper minor league of NASCAR, the Xfinity Series, and was annihilating the competition. This made him look very attractive to the Cup side of his grandfather's race team. Not only that, Mars Company was leaving JGR at the end of the year after being in the sport for almost 30 years, which would leave Kyle and Joe Gibbs sponsor hunting throughout the season. This essentially meant that if JGR couldn't find enough sponsorship for 2023, then they wouldn't be able to afford to pay Kyle's paycheck, which meant that Kyle Busch would be out from Joe Gibbs Racing, his home for the past 14 years, in favor of the much cheaper Ty Gibbs. But what was more concerning to me at this point was the fact that he hadn't won yet. I was starting to get anxious. Sure, this wasn't 2008 Kyle anymore, but he still had more left in the tank than this, right? Well, I was sort of right.
It's going to take a pretty bold move for that 14 to get by that 8, I can tell you. He's there. This
Will
could
he
be
go
big.
for a slide job?
He's going to
This is
slide
it.
job
There
him
he
right
goes.
there. He goes.
In for it. Down to the bottom, slides up into him. Who's going to save it? Neither one. They both spin out. Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch is going to win barely. Steals one. Holy cow.
Richard says, oh, man.
Oh, what a heartbreaker.
Yeah, so Kyle ended up scoring a win at the Bristol Dirt Race. And the way it happened was, well, you just saw it.
It's all about getting them, so just can't say enough. Man, I feel like Dale Earnhardt Sr. right now. This is awesome. I didn't even do anything.
Also, do me a favor and remember Tyler Reddick, the driver of the 8 car here.
18 straight seasons, Kyle Busch goes to victory lane in the NASCAR Cup Series, tying Richard Petty's career record for consecutive seasons with a victory.
Oh yeah, by the way, Kyle Busch had a bit of a streak going on. Ever since he had started his full-time career in the Cup Series, he had won at least one race in the division every single year, going all the way back to 2005. He had now tied that record with Richard Petty, who is widely regarded as NASCAR's greatest driver. 18 straight years with a win. Even just one win next year would make him the new record holder.
I can win on any surface here at Bristol. Bring it on, baby.
All in all, though, this win was definitely a fluke, and Kyle even acknowledged it in victory lane.
Adding another to the Bristol trophy case. What do you know? Wow, we backed into that one.
A win is still a win, but I didn't go to bed that night feeling super confident. In June, I went with my dad to the Cup race at Worldwide Technology Speedway, also known as Gateway. I'll tell you right now, the thing that myself and probably most of the people there remember the most was watching Ross Chastain making enemies with Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott. It was quite the time. As for Kyle Busch, I once again saw him put on a fantastic show, staying up front and leading laps late in the game. And once again, I saw him get bested and finish second, this time to Joey Logano, which I wasn't opposed to since he's one of my favorite drivers too, but just like last time, I would have preferred to see first and second place switch. Then something interesting happened on July 13th. Remember Tyler Reddick, the guy Chase Briscoe slid into at Bristol to give Kyle Busch the win?
Tyler, I appreciate you joining our availability, man, but I think you might be on the wrong... You might have entered the wrong media availability session.
I don't think that he did. Tyler will be joining the 2311 and Toyota family starting in 2024. Conversation started a long time ago, just very casual in the sense of really Tyler reaching out when we started the team, saying, love what you're doing. After a while, I realized that, I started asking those kind of important questions about his future. And then I asked, obviously, permission from the OEM, and they wholeheartedly agreed that this is a good direction for us.
Yeah, just days after winning the race at Road America, it was revealed that Tyler planned on leaving Richard Childress Racing for 2311 Racing starting in 2024, a year and a half into the future. And based on this statement that RCR put out after the fact, they were not happy about it. But what does this have to do with Kyle Busch? Hold your horses. September 2022. Kyle Busch still hadn't landed sponsorship for 2023. There are reports that tech company Oracle nearly signed on, but that deal fell apart at the last minute. Ty Gibbs is pounding the rest of the Xfinity Series to a pulp week after week. Time is starting to run out. But there's a silver lining here. Coming into Darlington, we're locked into the postseason thanks to that Bristol win, but of course that isn't a guaranteed spot in the championship round. We have to run a good race, make smart decisions, and above all else, have nothing go wrong with the car.
Adam's going to say, is there smoke coming out of the 18?
Coming out of the pipes.
The 18 is blowing up.
I remember watching this on TV, heartbroken, and hearing the roaring cheers from the crowd only rubbed salt in the wound.
The fans, they're going crazy.
He's so polarizing, and right now you're hearing it out of the crowd here as they see the 18 blowing up.
For your gauges.
Parker.
18 team cannot believe it. Ben Bayshore just slammed the pit box down here. Obviously upset with such a dominant race car to see this sort of events, guys.
I couldn't even really enjoy the eventual underdog winner of Eric Jones. Now Kyle Busch was in risk of entering must-win territory if he wanted to advance to the next round. September 13th, just days after the heartbreak at Darlington Raceway. Kyle Busch holds a press conference at the NASCAR Hall of Fame in North Carolina, where he makes this announcement.
I had to find a place where I knew I can go win races immediately. Collecting trophies is still the main reason why I get up every day and go to the racetrack in order to do this every week. I also needed a place where I felt like I could hit reset and I could be welcomed just as I am. I'm excited to announce that I'll be taking my talents to Welcome North Carolina to drive the number 8 car for Richard Childress Racing starting in 2023. I'd like to introduce you to my new boss, Richard Childress.
This was a bit of an unlikely pairing because Richard Childress and Kyle Busch had a history. But now both parties claim that they've put those incidents behind them, and RCR is ready to supply Kyle Busch with the fastest equipment they've got.
I got to give you your signing bonus. Will you hold my watch?
Absolutely.
How's that?
All right.
That's all we're going to talk about that.
And that's not all, because Richard pulls something out from his coat pocket and hands it to Kyle's son, Brexton.
Here is a contract for an option to drive for RCR in the future. How about that? Thank you, buddy.
And as an even bigger surprise,
when Tyler explained to me that he was not going to be back in 24, my grandson, Austin Dillon, he's here today, driver number 3, he came to me and said, Pop, what do you think about putting Kyle Busch in that car?
Austin could barely compete consistently, but he sure had an eye for talent.
There's a couple of topics I know we're going to be asked about. One of them is our sponsors and our partners. We're going to have a great lineup. We're going to be announcing those very soon, so can't wait for you to hear some of the sponsors that we're going to have. It's going to be exciting. That's going to be an exciting announcement that's going to come a little later.
But what about Tyler Reddick? As it turns out, Richard Childress in 2311 had made a deal to allow Tyler to go to 2311 a year early.
I met with him about an hour ago, and I explained to him that he wasn't going to drive the 8 car next year.
That probably gives you an idea of just how angry Richard was over the whole stunt Tyler pulled. By the way, Richard Childress Racing was once the home of Dale Earnhardt, undoubtedly one of the greatest race car drivers of all time. Driving a black car with a white number 3 and red details, he was feared on the track for a reason. He would win, no matter the cost. Now, take a look at the 8 car in this promo video. Black body, a white number, a little bit of red. Is Richard Childress suggesting that Kyle Busch could be the next Dale Earnhardt?
When I was up there with Kyle and we first started talking and we talked about championships and we talked about winning races, I looked at him in his eye and I seen that look in Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s eye that he's hungry. We're going to win.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's suggesting.
The car control, the way he drives a car, and take no prisoner attitude, that's the Dale Earnhardt style that I was accustomed to racing with, and I think Kyle has that modern day style of racing that Dale Earnhardt had in his time.
2023 is going to be interesting, but for now we have to salvage this season. After a 26th place finish at Kansas a few days prior to this announcement, things were looking bleak for Kyle, and Bristol was his final shot. If he won this race or had a strong enough outing, he'd advance to the next round. If not, then that would be it. And
issues for the 18. He's into the wall. Kyle Busch.
That looks like that's engine. Yeah, I was going to say that's out of both headers right there. So that does not look like, oh man, is that water I see pouring out? You hear the crowd. You either love them or you hate them. You see the fans with the M&M's gear, the 18.
There's a lot of rowdy fans out there, but this is not what they wanted to see out of Kyle Busch. Out of the race car, out of the race, and more than likely, he's going to be out of the playoffs. Kyle Busch never has been eliminated from this round.
Kyle Busch's fate was sealed. He was a round of 16 exit in 2022, thanks to yet another engine failure. Oh, by the way, how's Ty Gibbs doing?
Ty Gibbs is going to win in Las Vegas.
Ty Gibbs wins in Atlanta.
Here comes Ty Gibbs to the checkered flag. He wins a thriller at Richmond.
An amazing run for Ty Gibbs. He's going to win at Road America.
What a performance from Ty Gibbs and everyone at Joe Gibbs Racing today. They're in victory lane here at Michigan.
Ty Gibbs sees the checkered yellow flags. Ty Gibbs is going to win the race and the championship.
For the future of Ty Gibbs, it has been announced by Joe Gibbs Racing that he will elevate to the Cup Series to take over Kyle Busch. Ty Gibbs will drive for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2023, driving the number 54 Toyota Camry TRD. JGR announced that they will not use the 18 car for at least 1 year.
It's early February in 2023. NASCAR always opens up their season with an exhibition race. This year, it's happening at the LA Memorial Coliseum, where drivers will turn their first laps of the year. There are no points on the line here, it's just for money and a race for fun, so it's a good way to feel things out before the season enters full swing.
Well, Kyle, I usually come on and tell a pit crew to have a good night. Since they're not here, you guys have a good night. Have you some fun.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity. Hope to go out here and make you proud. Let's go.
You already have, buddy.
Everybody has their eyes on the Richard Childress Racing number 8 as the green flag drops.
And here they come. Green flag.
Man, Kyle Busch is giving William Byron all he can handle right now.
Fairly. Still fairly.
Truex coming for the lead. He and Wallace get together, and here comes Dillon to the inside. Oh, Logano drilled Kyle Busch, and around goes the 8.
Kyle Busch went on to finish third to his old Joe Gibbs Racing teammate Martin Truex Jr. And wouldn't you know it, Kyle's lone teammate Austin Dillon finished second. If Kyle hadn't been spun late, then he very well may have been able to win the race. This performance had me pumped. Lots of people had been saying that going from Joe Gibbs Racing to Richard Childress Racing, a team with their best years far behind them, was career suicide.
Congratulations to Martin Truex Jr., winner of the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum, runner-up Austin Dillon, and third-place finisher Kyle Busch.
And I was getting ready to watch KFB prove them all completely wrong. It didn't start off easy, though. The next race was the Daytona 500, and Kyle wrecked in his qualifying race, which meant that the team would have to spend many hours preparing a backup car for him. And due to that, he would be starting from the tail end of the field. But he'd come out on top after starting from the back before, and if his performances in the Clash and in the qualifying race before he wrecked were any indication, Kyle had what it took to bring home a win. So here we are, Daytona, Kyle Busch's true debut in the Richard Childress Racing number 8, the same race team that Dale Earnhardt had driven for. A man who desperately tried every year to win this very race, but it was never in the cards for him until later in his career. And now here was Kyle, someone who had never won the Great American Race in the latter half of his career, with that very same race team driving in a re-wrapped number 3? Come on, the script was writing itself.
And the 65th Daytona 500 is underway.
And you know what? All night long, Kyle Busch was actually competitive. He looked like his old self again. He was running up front with the new generation of superstars, putting the pressure on them at America's greatest race. He was playing it smart, having good pit stops, and avoiding trouble. And now, with 3 laps left in the race, he was in the lead with his teammate lined up right behind him. Was this it? Was Kyle Busch about to win the Daytona 500?
Oh, Suarez around. Off turn 4, caution waves.
No, at least not yet.
Well, that changes everything.
It sure does. Back in 1998, that would be the win, boys. Yeah, you're right.
So for anyone unfamiliar, for a long time NASCAR used to run races to the scheduled distance and the scheduled distance only. Take the Daytona 500 for instance. You'd run 500 miles exactly and end the race at 500 miles. And this is how Dale Earnhardt won the Daytona 500 in 1998. There was a caution with just a couple laps left and the race finished under yellow. But now it's 2023 and the rules have changed. Races can now go into overtime, where if a yellow flag comes out late enough, then extra laps will be added to the race in an attempt to finish under green flag in order to make for a more exciting finish. So now Kyle has to survive 2 extra laps of green flag racing unless another caution comes out before the field takes the one to go signal, in which case we get to stack him up and try again. And if a yellow flies after they take the 1-to-go signal, then the field is frozen at the time of caution, and whoever is out front at that point will be the race winner.
You're going to stack up 2 teammates. You know where they're going to go. Right on each other's tail, bumper to bumper. What is William Byron in a Chevy, Logano in a Ford, Keselowski in a Ford, Stenhouse in a Chevy? It's a mixed bag behind them.
As the field fires off, Kyle's got the inside lane with Austin in tow. The two had worked together great up to this point, so there was no reason to expect that they wouldn't be able to continue doing so. And at first, that's what they did. But coming off of turn 2, the momentum up on the top lane took off. The 8 and the 3 were falling behind. The 47, the 5, and the 20 pulled in front of the RCR cars, and then...
Big shove by Larson, and around goes the 3. Crash in turn 3. That fast. Unbelievable.
Stack them up and try again. Except now Kyle Busch's teammate crashed out. He's got Alex Bowman, a fellow Chevrolet driver, who's lining up behind him, but he's going to be restarting in the 3rd row now. He's going to have to make the drive of his life here. Overtime 2. The outside lane takes off first, but the 47 and the 22 are locked together and pulling away, and Bowman isn't giving Busch the push he needs. Going into turn 1, Busch is all by himself, but entering the backstretch, the 48 gives the 8 a shove, pushing him to behind Joey Logano. But entering turn 3, Busch falls back again, and the top 4 start breaking up. On the front stretch, Bubba Wallace tucks in behind Kyle Busch and pushes him to Joey Logano again. As the white flag flies, Kyle Busch actually has a real shot to win this. Next flag ends the race. Kyle Larson then slides into the middle lane, crowding the outside lane closer to the wall. And then, the 10 turns the 67, which turns the 5. The 5 barely clips the 23, and then the camera focuses on the carnage playing out behind the leaders. For several long, agonizing seconds, the race stays green with no cameras on the 8 car. And then the yellow flies, signifying the end of the race. The camera shows the 47, the 22, and the 20. The 8 is nowhere to be seen.
And we'll wait for official word on whether Ricky Stenhouse or Joey Logano has won the Daytona 500.
As we wait for the call, an aerial view of the crash plays out. And...
right there, he's in front of him and wins this great American race. Ricky Stenhouse has won the Daytona 500.
I remembered watching Jimmy Johnson getting taken out in the summer Daytona race in 2020, which ended his title hopes. I was watching the race on TV with my dad, and we were both devastated. Ever since then, I've only felt that feeling 3 more times while watching a race. This was one of those times. The other 2 times, we'll get to those. While this loss was absolutely heart-wrenching, it didn't hit me as hard as it probably could have. Because even though he hadn't won, Kyle had still done what he had set out to do, which he would have accomplished if he had won. Shut up the doubters and the haters, prove he wasn't washed up, send a message to the world that even in a comparably slower team than Joe Gibbs Racing, he could still hang with the best of them. Rowdy was about to go on a revenge tour, and everybody knew it. Now the only question was, when would his first win with RCR come?
400 miles.
Ready? Green flag.
The next week, Auto Club Speedway. Fans have their eyes on this race, as they expect it to be the last race for this track before it's either reconfigured or demolished. And with how great the Gen 7 car runs on worn-out intermediates, everyone knows they're in for a show. Plus, most people consider races at Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta to be toss-ups that aren't indicative of the drivers who'll be the best all season long. You're going to find that out at the more traditional levels. So would Kyle Busch be able to carry the momentum from Daytona? At first, it didn't look too good.
Kyle Busch, too fast exiting. Here's their audio.
Dude, it's so not right.
But by the end of the first stage of the race, he had worked himself back up to the top 15. Not terrible, but he would have to keep working. Come the end of the second stage, Kyle had done exactly that, running in the second position. The entire field was suddenly put on notice. Last week wasn't a fluke. Kyle Busch was for real. And by lap 138, he was in the lead. He wasn't out of the woods just yet, though. The race still wasn't over. But as the laps wound down, it became clear. Nobody had anything for Kyle.
Nerves are through the roof, especially for Richard Childress, as he famously told Larry Mack one February Sunday, we've been here before.
He's back. I'm telling you, RC's back. Get this thing back around there.
What may be the final super speedway NASCAR race ever in Southern California
RCR, baby.
Goes to Kyle Busch.
That's right. How about you, RCR and everybody? Kyle Busch, unbelievable. Randall Burnett, them girls right there, everybody's on end. It's a big win.
61st career win for Kyle Busch, 9th on the all-time win list, and he now, by himself, holds the record for consecutive Cup seasons with a victory, 19.
Yep, he had done it. Kyle Busch had outdriven everyone else in the field to claim his first victory for the 8 car in just the second points-paying race of the season. And hold on, are those cheers?
You notice what we didn't hear there.
Yeah.
We didn't hear the boos we're used to hearing.
That's right.
That was a different tone.
It's a good point.
Yeah, for some reason, from this point onwards, Kyle Busch started getting cheered for a lot more often, which was alien. Just a few months prior, everyone was happy to see his engines blowing up, but now, less than a year later, people were happy to see him winning? I do have a theory. NASCAR fans are the most passionate fans you'll ever meet, and I am no exception. I have extremely strong opinions about Hendrick Motorsports and its current driver roster, the playoff format, the Chicago street race, and more. But I'm presenting this video in a mostly unbiased manner for your enjoyment. If you saw me in the stands at a racetrack, though, you would probably wonder if I was okay. To this same degree, there are a lot of fans who hold their own extremely strong personal beliefs. There are fans who hate Denny Hamlin with the fire of 1,000 suns for what he did to Chase Elliott nearly 8 years ago. There are fans who are convinced that anyone who drives for Toyota is bad simply because they're driving a Toyota. And there are even fans who hold very strong beliefs about certain drivers for reasons. And on the same token, there are people who will defend certain aspects of the sport tooth and nail. Hendrick lovers, Ford lovers, short track lovers who raise hell and praise Dale. The kind of good old boys who the sport catered to in its early days. And I've met all these types of fans at racetracks. Point is, Kyle Busch was incredibly easy to hate. Like I said at the start of this video, he drove a Toyota, he butted heads with the sport's most beloved drivers, he came out of Las Vegas instead of the Southeast, and more. But now he was suddenly driving a Chevrolet for the race team that once housed the Grid Wrench number 3. And I don't know if that's all it took for lots of these people to change their minds, but whatever the case, you started seeing lots more support for Kyle. He definitely still had his haters, and when they wanted to make themselves heard, they were heard, but they didn't seem to be as numerous anymore. But anyway, Kyle Busch had locked himself into the postseason, and he'd be fighting for his 3rd championship come August. So I figured that for the rest of the season, I could just sit back and let whatever happened to happen, but as it turned out, Kyle Busch was just getting started. For the next 7 races, Kyle Busch posted 3 top 10 finishes, including a runner-up at the Circuit of the Americas. Sure, he wasn't running top 3 every single week, but for RCR equipment, this was damn good. And coming into Talladega, he was riding on some pretty respectable momentum. However, this was Talladega, one of those crapshoot racetracks. And with him firing off from the 17th starting spot, it looked like it would be another quiet day.
Oh, he's turned! He is turned.
There are 2 ways you can run a super speedway race. You can either race up towards the front all day and risk getting caught up in the sort of wrecks these big tracks produce, or you can roll around at the back of the pack and bide your time and pounce once the laps start running out. Which is exactly what Kyle Busch did the majority of the day, and it paid off, because after this caution he was all set to roll off from the 8th spot for a shot at an overtime finish. So let's see where this goes. It'll be tough considering Busch's only teammate exited the race early.
Oh, there it is, Chastain. Busch comes to shove, and Gregson's in the wall.
There's a phrase in NASCAR that goes like this: cautions breed cautions. This is an example of that. The nerves get to everyone, and you end up making poor judgment calls, which leads to accidents like this. It didn't work out well for most of the leaders here, but for Kyle Busch, it worked out perfectly, because he was getting ready to line up first for the next overtime attempt. But we saw a similar situation play out at Daytona, so while my hopes were high, I wasn't holding my breath.
Kyle Busch moved up to the outside for the restart, and now he's in position to steal one here.
Oh my god, is this actually going to happen? Nah, there it is.
Keselowski gave Bubba a bump to the lead. White flag.
All right, time to pack it up.
Down. Big push. Blaney.
Turns him.
Around goes Bubba.
Oh, into Keselowski. Around. Oh, another hard shot. Allmendinger.
Caution waves with Kyle Busch in front.
Oh, okay, I'll take it. Now riding on a 2-win season, Kyle Busch ticked off 2 top 10s in the next 4 races. That's 50%. One of those races that wasn't a top 10 was a DNF, but I wasn't too worried. In fact, I was getting more and more excited because after Charlotte, Gateway was up next, my new preferred track for seeing NASCAR races in person, since Chicagoland Speedway still wasn't on the schedule. I had taken the time off from work and from my band, and I was ready for a day at the racetrack. I drove out to Gateway with my dad for our annual NASCAR trip on the afternoon of June 3rd. Right before we left, I opened up Instagram and I was greeted with the news that Kyle Busch had won the pole. I did a little fist pump. For 3 years in a row, I was going to see my favorite driver running at the front of the pack.
And starting on the pole with a time of 32.802 seconds and a speed of 137 miles per hour, driving car number 8, the 3-Cheese Chevy from Las Vegas, Nevada, Kyle Busch!
When the cars fired their engines and I saw Kyle Busch be the first car to take the green flag, I was floored. I had hardly been more excited for a race in my life.
Green flag and the Enjoy Illinois 300 is underway.
And then Mother Nature decided to put a damper on things. Luckily, the weather delay wasn't too boring, because fans started throwing a football around in the stands, but it got onto the track at one point. Then it found its way into the hands of a member of Kyle Busch's pit crew, and he saved the day. When it landed on the track again, Carson Hocevar gave it a throw. And then Noah Gragson. And before we knew it, it was go time again.
Ryan Preece just ahead, trying to stay on the lead lap as stage 1 comes to a close.
To my utter delight, Kyle Busch stayed strong throughout the entire first stage of the race, going on to claim the stage win, which was actually his first one of the season. So, if he had already won 2 races on the season, and today he started from the pole and won his first stage of the whole season, then that was really bad news for the rest of the field.
Kyle Busch, stage 1 winner.
Now the question was if he could keep the momentum going for the rest of the race. At first, Kyle held on. After a while, though, the Penske Fords of Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney proved to be formidable opponents. By the end of stage 2, it was Blaney who took home the stage win, but Kyle Busch was right behind him. I was starting to get excited. I'd never seen Kyle Busch win a race in person. I'd come close a few times before. Gateway in 22, Atlanta in 21, and third grade me would have seen Kyle Busch win at Chicagoland in 2008 if it wasn't a school night. But now, Kyle had a shot at finally pulling it off with me in attendance. I had bought a Kyle Busch shirt earlier in the day, but I refrained from putting it on. I didn't want to jinx this. Stage 3. Kyle rolls off from the 6th spot. He methodically picks off his competitors and challenges Kyle Larson for the lead as the laps wind down. He grabs the top spot relatively easily, with 55 laps remaining. With 43 laps left, Noah Gragson has a hard crash, which bunches the field back up. But that doesn't affect Kyle Busch, who takes the lead back once the green flies. Then Christopher Bell spins, bringing out another yellow to bunch the field up again. And once again, Kyle Busch comes out on top after the restart. But this time Kyle Larson fought back, and it took longer for Kyle Busch to secure the lead.
There it is! Austin Dillon into... Oh! Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s in the wall.
Do you remember that saying, cautions breed cautions? Well, here we go again. And with every restart the field goes through, Kyle has to use up more and more of his tires and fuel to defend his lead. He can't do this forever. Or can he?
Big push by Hamlin on the Busch on the outside.
Larson does not want to lose that second position. He's going to be able to slide up in front of Denny.
Wow, this is a masterclass performance by Kyle Busch. At this point, I'm standing up, rocking back and forth on my feet nervously. 5 laps left, and the 8 has a 1-second lead over the 5. It looks like Kyle Busch is about to run away with this thing. I'm about to see Kyle Busch win a race in person.
Oh, Bubba Wallace in the wall. Turns 1 and 2. Could this possibly be another brake rotor issue?
I distinctly remember throwing my hat on the floor with frustration when this happened. I thought that was it. We'd gone through so many restarts, and the 8 and the 5 seemed to be on equal footing by this point. This next restart was going to be a toss-up, and I could very well end up watching yet another win from my favorite driver slip away. The race would restart with 2 laps remaining. And then...
Great jump by Kyle Busch. 3 wide into turn 3. How's that going to work out? Coming to the white flag. Next flag will end the race. Kyle Busch well out front. The fights for second. Samantha, it's official, so all he's got to do is bring it around here. Logano inside Larson, but off turn 4. Kyle Busch will get his 63rd career victory in the NASCAR Cup Series. How about little Brexton in there?
How about that home game for the crew chief?
And it's the 11th season in his Cup career. He's had at least 3 victories. For Richard Childress Racing, career win number 116. This is the 25th different Cup Series track that Kyle Busch has driven into victory lane. That puts him 10th on that all-time list. And it's the 9th time that he's won from the pole.
When you talk about winning in statistics, there's a lot that are associated with Kyle Busch.
Pole sitter, fastest car, just won the race, boys. Good job, Kyle Busch.
Oh my God, he had done it. My favorite driver of all time had just won a race in front of me. I grabbed that Kyle Busch shirt and I slipped it over the top of my Denny Hamlin shirt. I was jumping up and down and I was screaming with joy. Yeah, I was one of those fans. That night, I took the Kyle Busch flag I had bought and I flew it outside for the entire next week. My spirits were so high, I would come home every day after a hard day at work and I'd grin stupidly once I saw that flag flying on the mailbox. I even remember with talking to a customer at work who was wearing a Kyle Busch hat, and we had a short conversation about how we both expected him to make a deep playoff run. This was now a 3-win season. The revenge tour was going as strong as ever. And most of all, if you were into trends, you'd have taken note that 4 years separated Kyle Busch's titles in 2015 and 2019. Now it was 2023, another 4 years on, and we were solidly in the hunt for the championship. And with a second place finish the very next week at Sonoma, and 2 top 5 finishes in the next 3 races, it was clear. We had nowhere to go but up. At least, that's what I and so many other people thought. Aside from a strong 3rd place finish at Richmond and a 7th place finish at the regular season finale, a string of lackluster finishes throughout the last 7 races of the regular season had everyone scratching their heads. Where had Kyle's speed gone? Now he was wildly inconsistent. Sure, the Talladega win was a fluke, but Auto Club and Gateway were decisive victories. A few bad runs here and there are to be expected from any driver, but not like this, and especially not from someone who expects to be racing for a title in November. By the final race of the first round of the postseason, Kyle Busch had ticked off some respectable finishes, but he wasn't sitting on a particularly large points cushion. If he had a bad night, he'd be out of the championship hunt in the round of 16, just like in 2022.
Denny Hamlin wasn't ready for that one.
For Kyle, it was shaping up to be a quiet night at Bristol. He was knocking at the door of the top 10 every so often, but he was never in serious contention, which certainly wasn't ideal. By stage 2, he had moved down on the playoff grid, and he was approaching the danger zone. If he fell beneath 12th in points, then he was facing elimination. The race had settled into a rhythm by this point, though, and most of the drivers had established the spots they would be running in the whole night. So Kyle wasn't in too much danger, barring, of course, some massive wreck.
Buescher and Larson fighting for that 3rd spot, and around goes the 7 of LaJoie.
Up the track, into the, big contact. The
Newman
22.
gets him in the 51, and yes, Logano also involved. Big damage to the left rear.
Yep, there's something bent, broken on the left rear of that 22.
Talk to us. Left rear's down. Looks bent.
Defending series champ, Joey Logano, now in jeopardy of not making it out of the round of 16.
This wreck took out Joey Logano, who was in possession of one of the 12 spots to advance. With him dropping out of the race, this meant that he was out of the playoffs, and as a result, he took up one of the 4 spots to be eliminated. Once things got back underway, drivers settled back into their rhythm, where they stayed around where they were, which was mostly due to a flawed short track package at the time. So, by the end of the night,
he's led 142 laps, and he wins wins the night race at Bristol. Bubba Wallace, with his finish, will advance to the round of 12, as does Martin Truex Jr. Two former champions in Joey Logano and Kevin Harvick eliminated from the round of 12.
For the love of the game, it is the Bristol night race. Yes!
Kyle Busch had made it to the next round of the playoffs. While nobody really expected Joey Logano to fall off that hard, most everyone expected Michael McDowell and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to be round of 16 exits, which meant that stronger drivers like Kyle were pretty safe picks to advance. But this was just the warm-up round. All the rest of the drivers left in the postseason were heavy hitters, and things would start getting real now.
Kyle has radioed back. The right front just feels like it doesn't have air in it. It's chattering. He's asked to hang in there for a few more laps till the end of the stage.
You need to gain stage points. You don't have the pace to go up there and pass William Byron and time.
Oh, he's spinning out!
Up into the wall goes Kyle Busch. And hard contact with the back of the car. The caution comes out with under 7 laps to go in the stage.
My goodness.
He thought there was something wrong with the car. He had gone up the racetrack a few times. And now this trip up there gets him into the wall.
Yeah, huge damage on the 8 car running 8th. Good sign that the car did fold up and absorb some of that impact. But because of that, you see with the result. The result is a car that is severely damaged. It'll be shocking if they can keep this car going. They're going to be on the damaged vehicle policy from right now. They've entered the yellow line. 7 minutes is all they have to try to make something out of this.
If they can go, side drafting happening up front. Blaney on the high side, Harvick on the inside. They spin behind him. It's going to be Blaney.
Yes!
Blaney gets the win at Talladega.
And just like that, we're at another cutoff race. We're back at the Charlotte Roval, where Kyle's championship hopes came to an end in 2020 and 2021. And after 2 bad finishes to open the round, Kyle's at the bottom of the playoff grid. This is it. If he doesn't win this race, then he'll be out of the title hunt.
Racing at the Roval is underway.
Green flag.
Things were looking promising. Kyle started from the 8th spot. All he had to do was run a clean race and be ready to mount a charge once the laps began to run out. Which is exactly what he did. He stayed in the top 10 all day long. At the start of Stage 3, he was lining up on the front row, and he took the lead. Stage 3 started strong. Kyle Busch pulled out front, but just a few laps later, A.J. Allmendinger overtook him for the lead.
Kyle Busch concedes the spot.
Still there.
The second that he got past, Busch went all the way to the bottom of the list now on the lower left of your screen. So Busch fighting to get back up front.
As the laps wound down, Kyle pitted, and he lost more spots, which he would have to make up. And he still didn't have enough of a points cushion to get above the cut line. He needed to mount a charge and win, or he wouldn't advance to the next round.
Kyle Busch wants to be close enough that if they beat and bang, he can capitalize. Because there's going to have to be some contact. It's going to be hard pressed for the 24 to go by completely clean with no damage.
2 to go. William Byron chasing after Allmendinger. Busch has fallen back. He's 2.5 seconds behind these two. And now A.J. Allmendinger out of the final turn. He wins at the Charlotte Roval.
Love you, brother. Love you, man. Dinger's house, baby. Good job, buddy.
Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, Brad Keselowski, and Kyle Busch will have to fight for a title in 2024 because the fight has ended for this season.
Well, shit. A third place finish was certainly nothing to scoff at. Kyle had put up a valiant effort. But it was bittersweet because at the same time, that was it. Kyle's revenge tour had come to an end. And after his playoff exit here and a third place run at the next week's race, Kyle's performance entered a death spiral as the season came to a close. An 18th at Homestead, a 27th at Martinsville, and a 25th at Phoenix. Perhaps his performance here could be chalked up to a lack of needing to race hard, since he was eliminated from championship contention. If being eliminated took the wind out of my sails as a fan, then imagine what it did for the 18 themselves. Lots of people tried to come up with an explanation for Kyle Busch's dip in performance at the start of the summer. Again, Talladega was a fluke, but Auto Club and Gateway were Kyle's races to lose. Maybe it was a honeymoon phase of renewed energy that tapered off as the season went on. Maybe Auto Club and Gateway were flukes after all. I did some digging and I couldn't really find any decisive answers. Alright, time for 2024. Last year was a tale of two seasons. Hopefully a clean slate is just what RCR and Kyle need. And you know what? Even though the Daytona 500 wasn't too notable for Kyle, the race next week at Atlanta was just what I was hoping to see.
1 lap to go. Where does he block? Does he block high? Does he block low? Here it comes. Kyle Busch to the middle. Shooting a gap. No help with Kyle Busch. Oh, Suarez right alongside him. 3 wide. Off turn 4. Here they come to the flag. 3 abreast. Photo finish. I think it's Blaney. Unbelievable. 3 wide finish. Have you ever seen anything like that? Scoring has the margin between the first 3 cars at 0.00 seconds. How awesome was that?
The race finish is under review.
Freeze frame, stop motion to the line. That's too close to call.
99-12 in the 8. Race clear is a 99.
Now, of course, Kyle didn't win this race, but given how exciting the finish was, I couldn't be upset over it. That was freaking cool. Now, once again, Daytona and Atlanta are considered crapshoot racetracks, so the next week at Las Vegas is going to be the real test to see if RCR had gotten their act together. And... uh-oh. The season was such a drag to watch. Time and time again, I'd get my hopes up only to have them crushed. Some of the misfortune he experienced was out of his control, but the reality of driving RCR equipment had finally caught up to Kyle. The team was giving him race-winning cars just a season ago. What happened? At the All-Star Exhibition race, things reached a breaking point.
And the All-Star race is underway.
Oh, we got one in the wall right off the bat.
Busch. Oh, for Stenhouse, he's not going to be happy about that. $1 million on the line. There's not a lot of time, but Kyle Busch will pay you back, and here it comes.
Oh, boy.
Sideways.
He's in the
wall. Fence. He's done.
Kapow. That is not $1 million move. Stenhouse went 3 wide coming out of turn 2, and then he got here.
This is what I was talking about off of 2. Got pushed up into the wall. You're not going to get away with that. Not with that driver. Stuck him in the fence. It's not, it's over. Oh, wait a minute. He parked in Busch's pit box. Look at this. Got out in his pit box, Kevin.
I like that.
The race had hardly even gotten started, and Kyle was frustrated with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., so he flat out dumped him. That surprised me. Kyle hadn't done something like that in a while. And once the race was over, Ricky was waiting for Kyle by the RCR haulers.
Get out of here, bitch! Why are you putting 3 wide? I didn't touch you. Who cares? You know we're gonna fucking pit off of 2. We have plenty of room. There's no room. Plenty of room, bud. I'll wreck you at Charlotte because you're back there. I don't give a fuck. I can tell. I suck just as bad as you. I understand. Let's go.
I suck just as bad as you, he said to Ricky. This meant Kyle knew that he wasn't a championship contender anymore. He was racing at the back of the pack with the Ricky Stenhouses of the field. He was an underdog. At the start of June, it was time for my dad and I to go to our annual NASCAR race together, and once again we returned to Gateway. I had hope. Kyle's average finish at this racetrack was 1.5, so surely he'd put together a strong run.
Oh, and Larson's in the wall.
Larson loose under Kyle Busch, got into him. They're both in the wall.
Yeah, you see him come up at turn 2 right here, and I think that they make a little bit of contact right there. Kyle Larson trying to side draft, and I think Busch is frustrated with that. Squeezes him down the racetrack, and then Larson spins out into the 8, and they both hit the fence.
Maybe Busch crowded Larson, maybe Larson crowded Busch. Whatever the case, his day was done, and as he drove behind the wall, the fans around me clapped and cheered. Wait, what? Why? Yeah, he still had haters, but now it seemed to be back to the way it was during his tenure at JGR. I think the reason for this was because Kyle was getting frustrated and was starting to let it show. To be so competitive a year ago, and now to be relegated as a backmarker driver, that probably did something to his psyche. He was wrecking drivers on the track, fighting drivers off the track, making poor judgment calls. He was regressing back to 2008 Kyle Busch. He was starting to regain the qualities that made him hated in the first place, and it was reflected in the way the fans treated him, and it would be seen again a few weeks later at Nashville Superspeedway.
The 5 doesn't go. They bottle up behind him. Big wreck for the 8.
He gets a response, no matter what. Victory lane, he gets a response. Having issues? Absolutely, Rick. Talk about who doesn't. So if we can put the last pin in the graphic, we're going to show you who I believe has to be feeling good. It starts with Briscoe as you hear the crowd cheer for Kyle Busch. Man, it is.
After a hectic day, Kyle ended up getting caught up in a late wreck and crashed his car at the start-finish line in front of a crowd that sounded delighted. I was fed up, and Kyle looked fed up too.
Then a block from LaJoie. LaJoie gets into him. Kyle Busch blocked him, and LaJoie just ran into him, to be honest with you. I'm not saying he meant to do it, but either a misjudgment.
After the Brickyard 400, the Summer Olympic Games are being held, and NASCAR is about to take a 2-week break so that its TV partners can focus on the games. Something has to change during this break. RCR has to take a step back, evaluate the season so far, and make changes so they can come back swinging in order to get their cars into the postseason. Going into Richmond, the first race back after the break, I wasn't expecting much from Kyle. After all, this wasn't his strongest racetrack in recent years. And as for his teammate Austin Dillon, no shot. He ran 30th every week, so he won't be...
Rolls through 3 and 4 well again. And can he clear him? He does. Austin Dillon's out in front of Richmond.
As I watched Austin Dillon put on a strong performance, I'll admit it was pretty cool to see. But a part of me really wanted to see Kyle Busch driving that car instead. Of all the days for RCR to have a strong day, it was with this guy who never finished better than 25th on any given day.
Whoa! And the caution's going to come out right there with under 2 laps remaining.
With this caution, the field bunched back up, and Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin were ready to pounce.
Logano on the outside, they fan out. They're 4 wide, entering turn 1. Logano with a great restart. Logano clears him down the backstretch. One more time around for Logano. The white flag's in the air. Joey Logano through 3 and 4 for the final time. There's the contact. He does get to him. The 11 on the inside. He gets into the wall. Dillon's going to win it at the line.
What? Okay, what just happened? Sure, Denny and Joey were the 2 most hated drivers in Cup when this happened. But even a good portion of their haters didn't like this move. And once radio communications around the 3 began circulating online, it made both Austin and the entire organization of RCR look like scumbags. NASCAR ended up letting Austin Dillon's win stand, but they revoked the 3's playoff eligibility, meaning that this race win didn't guarantee him a spot in the postseason. What a joke this was. I was just resenting RCR more than ever now. I was ready to tune out entirely.
Hell yeah, Tyler. You're the man. How about that for improving some Michigan stats?
Hold on a second here. Maybe RCR had found something over the Olympic break after all.
Let's go here in Daytona. Category, and here we go. Chastain's involved.
Maybe my prayers are being heard after all. Just like at last year's 500, just like at last year's Spring Talladega race, it was an uneventful day for Kyle that led up to him being in the game late. He had played the game of running further back all day and was working his way through the field once the laps began running out. All that had to happen now was the race had to finish cleanly and...
Oh, they got together at 3. Whoa! McDowell goes up high!
Somehow, Kyle had made it through. And with a good number of competitive cars now taken out, that meant that Kyle had a better shot at victory.
Remember, a win in the next 2 races, that's the only path to the playoffs for Kyle Busch.
He lined up in the second row with 3 laps remaining. It was now or never.
But look at the eagerness of Kyle Busch on the inside in the 8 in the Cheddar's car. Oh, Berry's gone, and he goes up and over. Huge hit for Josh Berry.
Okay, now it was now or never. This crash took out even more competitive cars. Kyle had a clear view at the front of the field as they lined up for an overtime attempt. I stood up from the couch for this restart. I wasn't holding my breath, but at the same time, I was feeling pretty good. The only competitor I was worried about spoiling Kyle's day was Christopher Bell in the 20, who was lining up behind him. Lining up next to him was Harrison Burton, driver of the number 21. It had been years since this team had won a race, and they won that race with a different driver. Tonight was an outlier for Harrison, since he had hardly ever been competitive up to this point, so I expected his inexperience and lower-tier race team to hand this win and a playoff berth to Rowdy. Kyle gets a good push from behind. Off of turn 2, it's looking good, but going into turn 3, the 20 falls back, which slows Kyle's momentum. But coming onto the front stretch, Kyle tucks in front of Harrison, and then he dives back down in front of Christopher Bell. White flag. This was it. Going into turn 1, and things are looking good. And I'm just going to let you watch.
You've got to go back a long, long way for Kyle Busch. 2008, the last time he won here at Daytona. And now he is tantalizingly close to that victory. But here comes Harrison Burton for the Wood Brothers. He's being pushed by Parker Retzlaff. And the 23-year-old from Huntersville, North Carolina is at the front of this field and may race his way into the playoffs. Busch goes low, Burton blocks, he gets back up, comes to the line. Jeff, your little boy has done it. Harrison Burton wins in Daytona and does what his uncle and dad did. How about that? At a time when he doesn't have a ride in Cup next year, he wins at the World Center of Racing.
Remember that crushing feeling I told you about? That feeling when Jimmy Johnson wrecked at this race in 2020? When Kyle Busch lost the 2023 Daytona 500? I felt that again here as the 21 crossed the line just feet in front of the 8. Even as I was editing this video together, watching that pass on the backstretch still stung. People gave Kyle Busch props for not sending Harrison Burton spinning, and instead racing him with respect, which was something that NASCAR had been lacking for the past few years. And weeks. And while I agreed, part of me wondered what could have been if Kyle had spun Harrison. His reputation be damned, I was ready to see him do anything to win this year. The next week at Darlington was the regular season finale in 2024. Kyle needed to win this race if he wanted a chance to race for a title. He didn't have enough points to make his way in that way. It all came down to this.
It's time for the Southern 500.
Kyle Busch seemed strong to start, but as the first and second stages came and went, and as the final stage went on, he was nowhere near the front. At this point, I had given up all hope. Kyle Busch had committed career suicide by going to RCR after all. So imagine my surprise when a certain someone began making a late charge with under 40 laps left. But a dark horse contender had emerged by this point. Chase Briscoe, driver of the number 14 Mustang. He'd been a serviceable driver, but not everyone saw him as a major title threat. But if he could keep up the sort of performance he was putting on, then he could very well win his way into the postseason tonight. But not if Kyle Busch had anything to say about it.
Look at Kyle Busch in that A-car. Briscoe tried to check out, but Kyle Busch, he wants to play.
Ever since the Olympic break, RCR has been getting better. There's 3 wide. Wow, we got a caution. Multi-car incident. Ty Gibbs, Josh Berry, Bubba Wallace, it's over.
We're doing this again, huh? It's going to be more late restarts that'll decide whether Kyle Busch is going to win or not. Kyle came into pit for 4 fresh tires and fuel. He lost a few spots on the racetrack, but having new tires would give him an advantage over his competitors.
Who would have thought Kyle Busch would have had a chance? I bet I can tell you who Kyle Busch thought Kyle Busch had a chance, and they've got him up front where it counts now.
He rolled off 10th for the restart.
Watch that yellow and black car, the 8 of Kyle Busch, on the inside of Keselowski. Now lining up Priest. He goes to the inside of Priest.
That's the power of fresh tires and a desire to race for a championship. Kyle picked off the competitors in front of him as if he were racing on beginner's difficulty in a video game. And before he knew it, the only car in front of him was Chase Briscoe. The odds were stacked in Kyle's favor.
And this isn't just fresh tires on anyone. This is on Kyle Busch, a 63 race winner, multi-time champ, future Hall of Famer, and has made the playoffs the last 11 years straight.
Over the next 13 laps, Chase Briscoe couldn't pull away, and Kyle Busch closed in slowly. Kyle had the better car, but the laps were running out. Something had to happen.
There is nothing between these two at the end of 500 miles. 1 lap to go, presented by Credit One Bank. Briscoe hang on? Or has Kyle Busch got something? Both guys are going to break a very long winless streak. But who will it be? Kyle Busch throwing everything at Chase Briscoe he can. It's a win and you're in. And the 29-year-old from Mitchell, Indiana, Chase Briscoe wins the Southern 500 and is going to the playoffs. 2 weeks in a row, we have been treated to a win and you're in. This time, it's Chase Briscoe.
And that was it. Kyle Busch had missed the postseason, and that devastating feeling from last week was back. Even if he ran well in every race for the rest of the year, even if he won every race for the rest of the year, none of it would matter because he wasn't eligible for a championship. Throughout the first round of the playoffs, Kyle's performance disappointed, and I began to realize something. There was a chance that I had witnessed Kyle Busch's final victory when I went to Gateway in 2023. I didn't want to admit it, but with every week that passed, that small idea grew bigger and bigger in my mind. And as the fall dragged on, with Kyle Busch not having any way to fight for a championship, I found myself not caring anymore or enjoying watching races. But I tuned in anyway, including for the fall race at Kansas Speedway, to see if he could catch lightning in a bottle.
Let's go! Let's get the next phase of the playoffs started!
Kyle started from the 3rd spot in this race. Throughout the day, he wasn't running terribly, but he wasn't running spectacularly either. But the possibility of a win that would extend that annual win streak to 20 years kept me glued to the screen. And it was worth it, because by stage 3, he was looking dangerous.
8 is door-to-door with the 1. Yeah, he's got to take it now. He's got forward momentum on him. That's it.
Soon, though, a familiar face appeared in front of Kyle. It was Chase Briscoe, and he was looking to keep himself from going a lap down. He was a playoff driver, after all, so holding this position would definitely matter.
This is going to be a tough pass, so Kyle Busch he's got to be really good right here. If not, he can make a mistake, and Chastain can get by him. Briscoe gives him the top, but now Briscoe up to the top. No, he doesn't. Oh, he pitches him off.
Whoa, he hit a wall! Busch is gone! It's over for Kyle Busch. A day that looked like a dream run and maybe a victory run has come to an end.
Controversial as well, with racing with the 14. Very, very tight racing for a car that was trying to stay on the lead lap.
Can you imagine the disappointment with Kyle Busch? I mean, all that's on the line for him, that close, 30 laps to go with the lead.
That crushing feeling was back. And you know what made it even worse? Ross Chastain, driver of the 1 car, was in 2nd place when this happened. And you know what happened once the race finally reached its end?
And it's going to be win number 1 for season 2024 for Car 1. Ross Chastain and Trackhouse Racing win in Kansas.
He won, which means that if Chase Briscoe hadn't blocked Kyle the way that he did, then Kyle could have very well won the race.
You've been so close to getting that victory this season. We know you want to keep that streak of 20 straight years of winning the NASCAR Cup Series alive. What's the emotion as it sort of slipped away from you there?
Just nothing. I mean, I'm numb. I don't know what to do.
A news story breaks in October. A rogue employee at Joe Gibbs Racing is being accused of selling private data to an unnamed race team. This would benefit that team's on-track performance as a result. So let's take a minute and try to deduce which unnamed race team this was. Hendrick Motorsports? No way. They're already a superpower, so it can't be them. So that also rules out Team Penske. Spire Motorsports? Maybe. They've been more competitive as of late, but then again, they've been on the up and up for a few years now. They aren't the backmarkers they used to be. Let's rule out Front Row Motorsports and RFK Racing for the same reason. Could it be Wood Brothers Racing? They did win that Daytona race, but then again, ever since then, they've gone back to being a mid-pack team, so probably not. Colleague Racing? I doubt it. They've been running about the same as they have been for the past year or so. Same goes for Trackhouse Racing, 2311 Racing, Stewart Haas Racing, and Legacy Motor Club. Who else does that leave? Beard Motorsports? No, it can't be them either. They only run a few races every year. So that leaves... Kyle
Busch has an average finish this year of 17.7
For 6 races immediately following the Olympic break, including that Richmond race, Kyle Busch had an average finish of 5.4, and his teammate Austin Dillon had led 0 laps all year until that Richmond race following the Olympic break. He led 35.
At the time of writing, it still hasn't been made clear who the sole data benefited, but I think Richard Childress Racing is a pretty safe bet. It sucks to say, but ever since around July of 2024, I grew disenchanted with the sport for a variety of reasons. I think the biggest reason is how everything is officiated now. Odd displays of inconsistency, questionable calls, penalties for one guy but not this other guy who did the exact same thing. I'm writing this whole script out of order, and this paragraph is being written right after the fall Martinsville race, which was a total crap show at the end. But I think part of my disenchantment also comes from not seeing my favorite driver win all year, which is something that I've never experienced in my entire life as a NASCAR fan. I know that he still has a shot at Phoenix, but does he really have a chance? The answer is no, he didn't win. This was Kyle's first winless season of his Cup career. His legacy for the stat of most consecutive years with at least one win in the Cup Series will be 19 years. 1 year short of a nice round number. But hey, at least Joey Logano got the championship, right? Yeah, I know he probably didn't deserve it, but let me be a fan of a driver I like, okay? Sad to say, but this story doesn't really have a particularly good ending for anyone who we followed in this journey, which may also be playing a part in my disenchantment. Kyle was winless in 2024. Ty Gibbs still hasn't won a race in the 2+ years he's been running Cup in Kyle's old car at Joe Gibbs Racing. He's cleaned his act up when compared to how he was back in the Xfinity series, and he's really only ever had episodes at exhibition races, but gone with his immature ways are also his winning ways. And Tyler Reddick, the old driver of the number 8, made the championship round in 2024 and finished 4th in the championship standings, driving the number 45 for 23XI Racing. But due to 23XI suing NASCAR over antitrust concerns, NASCAR and 23XI have been in a nasty court battle, and it's going to be a while until we see who prevails. So since there's not really a good ending here, let me try and come up with one so you can come away from this with something. NASCAR is all about the drivers. Without drivers, you don't have a sport. So what the drivers bring to the table matters a lot. Not only on track, but also off track. You could be winning races week in and week out, but if you don't have much of a personality, you aren't really going to stand out to a lot of fans. I like drivers like Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, and Chris Buescher, but sadly what holds them back from me liking them even more is the fact that they're just so... They'll say exactly what they have to say, they'll thank their sponsors, but they don't have anything that makes them stand out personality-wise. Maybe that's why I like Kyle Busch, and why I like most of the villain-type characters in NASCAR. They bring something interesting to the table, they say some out-of-pocket things, they act out on camera. Personality matters a lot, and in my personal and definitely biased opinion, Kyle Busch brought it like no other driver did from my generation.
It's pathetic to have to lean on insurance. My premiums are going to go up.
I'll even tell you a secret. While I was working on this video, I changed my mind about Ty Gibbs. Just like with Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, and Denny Hamlin, I can't tell you why I started liking him. It just happened. As he was ascending the ranks, he definitely rocked the boat far more than Kyle Busch did, but at the same time, he just played too deeply into the villain role for a while there. You can be the heel, you just can't overdo it. You gotta strike a balance. So if you want to be a NASCAR driver, or anything at all really, here's what I'll say to you. Be yourself, and be personable. You don't have to go out there and make enemies with everyone or say crazy things to the people who talk to you, but be yourself. Shed some light on an otherwise boring day. Be the life of the party. And you know what else? I've come to terms with Kyle Busch being more of an underdog now. That just means it's all the more special when he has a good run. If he never wins again, well, at least I was there when he took the checkered flag at Gateway for the final hurrah of his competitive career, which is a pretty cool bragging right. And if he does win, then knowing that he overcame everyone else as a true underdog will make it all the better. And I'm fine with either outcome, because it's been one hell of a ride.